In 2016, California wife and mother Sherry Papini disappeared for 22 days. When she was found, she told authorities a detailed account of being kidnapped and tortured. Years later, in a stunning twist, Papini pled guilty to making false statements about what happened to her, setting off a media firestorm. Now, for the first time, Sherry Papini is telling her side of the story and revealing shocking new information. Sherry Papini, Caught in a Lie, an ID documentary event, Monday, May 26th at 9 on ID. Set your DVR. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 253 of the True Crime All the Time podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Hey, man, I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing real well.
Good.
Hope you've had a good week.
I did.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah.
Because I'm hoping that you did.
Well,
and now you're verifying the fact that you did.
Had a few days off, so I had a good time on my days off.
Well, that is nice. Everybody needs a few days off every now and then.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a jam-packed episode. Let's go right in with our Patreon support. We had Marie Forsberg.
Hey, Marie.
Urban Wren.
What's going on, Urban Wren?
Aaron Sandler jumped out at our highest level.
Hey, Sandler.
Rachel Smith jumped out at our highest level.
What's going on, Rachel?
Tiffany Salyer.
Hey, Tiffany.
Kathy Aldridge.
Appreciate that, Aldrich.
Richard Cariff.
Hey, Cariff.
Becky Halula.
Hey, Halula.
Megan Caskey jumped out higher than our highest level.
Wow, appreciate that, Kasky.
Tara Hammond Racer.
Hey, Hammond.
Stacy Rathbone.
What's going on, Rathbone?
Tim Wessels.
Hey, Tim.
Jenna McCarthy.
What's up, Jenna?
Kim Pennypacker.
Hey, Pennypacker. That sounds like a James Bond character.
It does.
Yes.
It does. Yvette Bershaw.
What's going on, Bershaw?
Megan Joyce.
Hey, Megan.
Marin Nixon.
What's going on, Marin?
Joy McCrae jumped out at our highest level.
Hey, Joe.
John Duncan.
Hey, John.
Rachel Buckley.
What's up, Buckley?
And Louis Tyrone jumped
Hey.
out at our highest level as well.
Appreciate that, Tyrone.
And Gibbs, if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Orla McGrath.
Hey, appreciate that, Orla.
So we love it, right? The new support, the continued support on Patreon. We had some great PayPal donations from Dana Mackey,
Hey, appreciate that, Dana.
Megan Caskey,
There's Megan again.
and Cheryl Gilliam.
Hey, what's going on, Gilliam?
So thanks to all of you as well. All right, Gibbs, right now we have an episode out on True Crime All the Time Unsolved. We're talking about the 2014 disappearance of Lars Mittank.
Yeah, man, what a famous YouTube video that was. When it came
Yeah,
out.
I mean, it's an kind of a famous unsolved case. I think a lot of it comes from this YouTube video that's been watched so many times.
Yeah.
You know, this footage of what is thought to be his last sighting.
Right.
And, you know, so we'll get into the details and the theories and all of that, but definitely check that episode out. All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time?
I'm ready, man.
You know, we just recently had the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. It was a little rough for me, as I think it was for a lot of people.
It really was.
You know, there was a lot in the news. There was some, you know, new documentaries that came out. And every time I watch that stuff, it brings back the feeling of that day and the days after, and it hurts. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. But just a week after the devastating 9/11 attacks, an act of domestic terrorism further shook the U.S. Letters laced with powdered anthrax were sent to various locations throughout the country, resulting in 5 deaths and 17 hospitalizations. The anthrax attacks disrupted the U.S. postal system, closed down important media and government buildings, and sparked another large-scale terrorism investigation. And Gibbs, I remember this so clearly. I was actually working at a job that was the job I had prior to the one where you and I first met.
Right.
And we were sending out a lot of packages. We were receiving a lot of packages. And I can remember the fear with people opening packages, worried about whether or not they were going to be poisoned by anthrax.
Right. Yeah. Scary times.
The likely perpetrator in the attacks was thought to be a U.S. Army microbiologist named Dr. Bruce Ivins. Both the FBI and the Army have come out and said that they believe that Ivins was the perpetrator, but just before he was going to be prosecuted for the attacks, Ivins ended his life, taking all of his knowledge of the Anthrax murders with him. Now, I will say this, there are some who believe Ivins was innocent. They call into question some of the aspects of the investigation. So in this episode, we'll discuss the anthrax attacks, the life and kind of strange behavior of Dr. Ivins, the timeline of the investigation, and some of the things surrounding his guilt or innocence. On September 16th, 2001, officials worried that a biological attack would follow the 9/11 terrorist attack. They had some intelligence reports that indicated Al-Qaeda planned to commit some type of biological attack on the U.S. Dr. Donald Henderson, the doctor who led the campaign to eradicate smallpox, gave Health and Human Service officials information on both anthrax and smallpox. And it was just 2 days after that someone committed an act of bioterror in the U.S.
You know, it's not even a week after the 9/11 attacks. So, you know, everybody's on edge.
Yeah, everybody was on high alert. What was coming next, right? What happened on 9/11 was horrific.
Yes.
But was there something else planned?
And I think everybody felt like there was.
I do too. I can remember the fear of what is going to happen next. On September 18th, 2001, letters laced with powdered anthrax were mailed to several locations in the U.S. from a mailbox in downtown Princeton, New Jersey. One letter was mailed to a tabloid photo editor in Florida, a man named Robert Stevens. Stevens worked for American Media, a publisher of the National Enquirer. He was hospitalized on October 4th and died on October 5th. After he failed to respond to antibiotics. So this was the first anthrax death in the U.S. in 25 years.
Wow.
Letters were also mailed to ABC News, CBS News, and the New York Post. And the letter mailed to the New York Post included a note which said, "Death to America, death to Israel." So I think first off, Gibbs, you have the first anthrax death in 25 years. That had to have set off massive alarm bells. And on top of that, you know, somebody sending letters saying death to America, death to Israel. Okay, this is looking like the bioterrorism act that we were all worried about.
Imagine the panic in all these corporate mailrooms.
Yeah, and it was real. It really happened. And it's going to get worse, right? As more and more letters are discovered. On October 8th, anthrax was found in the Boca Raton offices of American Media. That building was closed. The next day, on the 9th, more letters were posted. The FBI began investigating the attacks. On October 12th, an NBC employee in New York tested positive for anthrax poisoning. And then on the 15th, Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle, a Democrat from South Dakota, told reporters anthrax was found in his office. And Democrat Senator from Vermont, Patrick Leahy, also received a letter laced with anthrax. So really, Gibbs, in a span of less than 2 weeks, this is panic-inducing stuff.
It sure is.
That was seen. But there's more to come.
Absolutely, there is.
The next day on the 16th, a 7-month-old baby of an ABC News freelance producer tested positive for anthrax poisoning. The baby developed a rash and some symptoms of exposure after visiting the Manhattan office on the 28th of September. On October 18th, a CBS employee and a New Jersey postal worker tested positive for anthrax. On the 23rd, 2 postal workers from Brentwood facility in Washington, D.C. were confirmed to have died from anthrax inhalation. So again, as these reports get released, the panic meter rises and rises. Okay, first it's a couple of media outlets.
Right.
Now you've got some senators. Now we're seeing people die who worked at the post office. How much of this is going around? We don't know. Nobody knew at that point.
No. You never knew once you opened that envelope what was going to be inside.
On October 26th, the U.S. State Department mailroom staffer was hospitalized. On the 28th, a New Jersey postal employee tested positive. On the 30th, a New Jersey hospital patient became the 15th reported case of anthrax poisoning. And I think as much as 9/11 obviously dominated the headlines, this cut in pretty deep. This became a huge story. On October 31st, Kathy Wynn, an employee of the Manhattan Eye, Ear, and Throat Hospital, died from anthrax inhalation. And then on November 21st, Ottilie Lundgren, who was 94 years old and lived in Connecticut, became the 5th person to die from anthrax exposure.
This was all over the news. I remember that.
Yeah, it was everywhere. Now, we're still going through a pandemic, right, that is dominating the news cycle. It's a rarity to have something like this that stretches on for as long as it does, that makes the news kind of night in, night out. Normally you have these huge stories that break and they're in the ether for a period of time. But stories like this were so big, they were being covered on a massive scale. The anthrax attacks spread from New York to Florida. Thousands of people started flooding emergency rooms because they were worried that maybe they too had been the victim of some type of anthrax poisoning. Senators and Supreme Court justices fled their offices. When it was all said and done, Gibbs, the letters that were mailed only contained in total a tablespoon of anthrax.
Doesn't take much, though.
Well, it doesn't, because that was enough to kill 5 people and hospitalize 17 others. And not only that, but it disrupted the entire U.S. mail system and paralyzed a lot of parts of the federal government. According to the CDC, anthrax poisoning is a serious infection caused by the bacteria Bacillus anthracis. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but that's what I'm going with.
You are saying it correctly.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Sure.
Anthrax is found naturally in soil and commonly affects domestic and wild animals. Anthrax is rare in the U.S., but you can be exposed from contaminated animals or animal products. Basically, anthrax spores get into the body and then they activate. The bacteria multiplies and it spreads toxins that cause illness.
I mean, the good thing is that anthrax exposure is treatable with antibiotics and antitoxins.
But if it's not treated quickly enough, it absolutely can be deadly. And it was. We know 5 people died. I think at first officials suspected the Soviet Union because, they had weaponized a lot of anthrax over the years. They also suspected Al-Qaeda, not surprisingly, right? The terrorist organization responsible for the 9/11 attacks. But really within a few days, investigators found evidence that this most likely was not the case. It was more likely that the attacks were an act of domestic terrorism. And I think that's very scary. We always have the threat of an attack coming from outside. But when you think about somebody trying to, spread this deadly thing from inside the country, that's pretty scary.
It really is.
And investigators really came to this conclusion based on a couple of pieces of evidence. So you had the letters. That was the first piece. And then the second was the strain of anthrax used. One of the letters advised the recipients to take penicillin. So I think just based on that, Gibbs, investigators thought, okay, if this is Al-Qaeda, they are not going to give people information on how to not die from anthrax, right? Get to a hospital, get some penicillin, it will save your life. That's not really how they operate. And then Dr. Paul Keim, an anthrax geneticist at Northern Arizona University, identified the spores in the powder as Ames, a lethal anthrax strain used in United States research. So that's where you get it's coming from within.
Right. Very potent stuff.
Oh, there's no doubt.
Makes me a little nervous knowing that that type of research is going on. But I know that it's always been going on, always will continue to go on somehow, right?
Oh, there's research going on right now that none of us know about. And if we did, it would probably scare the bejeebies out of us.
Yeah, exactly.
It happens. We just don't know about it all. But you said lethal. Definitely is not something you want to leave in a baggie lying around on your kitchen table or anything like that. So I think after all of this, some theories began to emerge that the perpetrator was a bioevangelist, an American obsessed with bioterrorism, maybe somebody who worked in biodefense, but wanted to either send a message or kind of gain some type of prestige from the attack. So based on that, the FBI turned their suspicion to the scientists who were working to help them. And one of those scientists was a guy by the name of Dr. Bruce Ivins.
So this is where Ivins comes into the picture.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about him a little bit. Bruce Ivins was born April 22nd, 1946 in Lebanon, Ohio.
It's really close by.
It's literally like 2 towns away from where we are right now. We talked about it in the episode on Woody Harrelson's father. Woody Harrelson was born in Lebanon. When I played basketball in high school, that was one of the teams that we played. They were in our league. His parents were Randall and Mary Ivins. He was the youngest of 3 boys. And it's been said, Gibbs, that the Ivins didn't want any more children after they had their first 2, and that when Mary became pregnant in 1945, she attempted to cause a miscarriage by sitting on the stairs and bouncing down them repeatedly.
It's saying that she really did not want another child.
Yeah, it is. It didn't work, and Bruce was born in 1946. His father, Randall, was a pharmacist and proprietor of a store called Ivins Drugs. He was described as generous, chatty, non-confrontational. Family said that Mary hid violent, abusive behavior behind a kind of prim and proper image. One of Bruce's brothers told the LA Times, "Mom could explode. She inflicted terror on all of us." Randall often came to work with black eyes and other signs of physical abuse. He told his coworkers that Mary hit him with brooms, and he was reportedly terrified of her. She also once hit him with a skillet and stabbed his hand with a fork.
I've been stabbed with a fork.
I've been stabbed with an X-Acto knife one time.
I didn't really mean to do that, though.
It still hurt.
Yeah.
So one night, Mary called Dr. Ralph Young, who was a neighbor, and told him, "Ralph, come down here. I've killed Randall." When the doctor got there, I guess Randall answered the door. He was covered in blood, but managed to survive his wounds. So, there's no doubt there was a lot of violence in this home. And it sounds as though Gibbs, the majority of it, at least from the research, from what we gathered, was perpetrated by Mary on Randall. And we know that happens. It's not the norm.
No.
Right? What we normally see is men being abusive to women, but it does happen the other way around. It was also reported that Mary was physically and emotionally abusive to her children, but to a lesser extent than she was with her husband, Randall. Family said that Bruce and his brothers were emotionally affected by what was going on at home. Now, who wouldn't be, right? It sounds like it was very chaotic, but as a coping mechanism, he would blindfold his stuffed animals and talk about, what you would have to call an interest in bondage. He also developed an obsession with guns and weapons. He was a kid who had trouble making friends in school and was excluded by the other children.
Well, depending on what type of conversations he was having, I can see why. You're going to talk about some of that stuff, I'm out.
Yeah, I like to tie up my stuffed animals, and I'm into bondage, guns, weapons. Bob Edens, a newspaper delivery boy, told the LA Times Bruce was very intelligent, and he made sure that everyone around him knew it. He had this inability to become part of a group in a natural way. So he would act out to get attention in weird ways. He had no sense of normalcy.
I think we all know somebody like that.
Who has a lot of trouble fitting in. Sometimes people will force things to try to fit in, but it's not natural, right? It's forced. It's kind of drawing attention to yourself for the sake of getting attention to maybe try to fit in. It doesn't work very well, very often.
Can't force it, man.
Ivins graduated from Lebanon High School. He was described by classmates as nerdy. He liked photography and he enjoyed studying bacteria. He later told his adult friends that he was bitter about his high school experience, right? Being excluded in school, not being allowed to join in, to be part of groups. Ivins then attended the University of Cincinnati to earn his undergraduate degree, which is another tie-in because that's where my oldest daughter attends college.
Yeah, just again, down the road a little bit.
Yeah, about 40 minutes south of where you and I sit right now. Now, allegedly, he liked to roam around the campus with a loaded gun. And when he felt overwhelmed with anger, he would open fire inside empty buildings, imagining various objects were people who had wronged him. Now, this all came from information that he gave to a therapist later in life, but it's not really known if this was the truth. He said it, but he could have been making it up.
Scary enough, though.
Well, it is scary. I mean, this is a real Steve Buscemi in Billy Madison sitting in his basement, putting on lipstick, writing names down that, he's going to go after. That is immediately what comes to my mind.
Yeah. Good tie-in.
Don't let allergy season slow you down. Get common allergy meds for as little as $15 with GoodRx. So you and your family, pets included, can stop allergy symptoms before they start. GoodRx is free and easy to use. Just search for your prescription on the website or the app, compare prices, and get a free coupon to show your pharmacist. Save at over 70,000 local pharmacies nationwide, including Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Publix, Kroger, and many more. Check GoodRx before every trip to the pharmacy to save up to 80% on both brand and generic medications. And did you know GoodRx rewards you for saving money too? Join GoodRx Rewards today and earn points every time you use a coupon. Remember, GoodRx is not insurance, but works whether you have insurance or not. And it could be your insurance copay price. I've been using GoodRx for years, and I can't tell you how many times I have saved money even with my insurance. Stop allergies before they start and save big on allergy medications this season with GoodRx. Go to goodrx.com/TCAT. That's goodrx.com/TCATT. Once the temps start rising, I realized I was back in the same worn out rotation. Same tank, same shorts, same everything. So I gave my daily uniform an upgrade with Quince. Their pieces are easy, elevated, and somehow make me feel more put together without even trying. Like their 100% European linen shorts and dresses from $30. Luxe swimwear, Italian leather platform sandals, and so much more. The best part, everything with Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than what you'd find at similar brands. By working directly with top artisans and cutting out the middleman, Quince gives you luxury without the markup. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. I'm getting ready to stock up on shorts for summer from Quince, and I know they're going to be amazing because everything I've ordered has been of the highest quality, and the prices are amazing. Treat your closet to a little summer glow up with Quince. Go to quince.com/TCAT for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/TCATT to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/TCAT. In the mid-1970s, Ivins earned his PhD and he worked as a researcher at the University of North Carolina. In December of 1975, he married his wife, Diane. They had 2 children, twins Andy and Amanda. The Ivins moved to Maryland in late 1978. Then in 1980, he was hired as a microbiologist at Fort Detrick. And Gibbs, the Army laboratory at Fort Detrick has been described by the New York Times as the government's brain for biological defense. Okay, that seems pretty important.
It does. And I've seen some articles in the past about that place that makes you kind of feel a little scared.
Well, we know there are a lot of people in the world who don't like us. There are also a lot of countries that have, at the very least, experimented with biological warfare. It's scary stuff.
It is scary stuff.
It was also reported by the New York Times that Ivins was hired without a psychiatric evaluation and was granted secret level security clearance. He basically helped develop the new and improved anthrax vaccine for Army soldiers. And at the age of 55, he participated in the Amerithrax investigation. Ivins spent the months following the attacks teaching federal agents all about anthrax. So there's no doubt that over the years, this guy became an expert, right? He was in the field for quite a long time. You're not going to pick a guy to teach federal agents about anthrax in the wake of, these mailings if he's not at the top of his game. That would be my take.
Oh, I certainly would agree with that.
But here's the thing about Ivins, his coworkers all loved him. A lot of people came out later and said that, he was kind. He gave Hershey's Kisses to people in the office. He sang songs. He read poems. He loved to have conversations about ethics with his colleagues. Really, their only criticism of Bruce Ivins was that he was what a lot of people referred to as thin-skinned. And I think we all know somebody like that.
Sure we do.
A great person, but maybe easily offended, take things the wrong way. And it was said about him. He was sensitive to criticism from Army soldiers when they said that his vaccine made them sick. Now, as much as coworkers liked him, some said they loved him, they did acknowledge that he was a bit odd. Apparently, he once sent a Christmas card email with a picture of Happy Holidays spelled out in anthrax spores. But I guess, Gibbs, if your whole world is anthrax, is it that odd? I don't know.
I mean, you could look at it that he just had a really good sense of humor back then.
Would you call it a really good sense of humor or
really bad?
Maybe an odd sense of humor, or a sense of humor that people found odd. But here's the thing. Bruce Ivins had a secret life behind the image of, this happy family, this successful career that he had, which all of that was real. He had some strange obsessions, some violent fantasies, and some severe mental health issues that really very, very few people knew anything about.
Well, the Army never screened him for him when he joined up,
which I thought was strange. Again, I don't know how they did things in, let's say, the 1980s. I think I've mentioned it before, but my former neighbor that lived right behind me, he worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He obviously had some type of security clearance. I don't know how high it was, but I would get a phone call. I think it was on a yearly basis, and they would ask me all kinds of questions about him. I mean, they were doing like an in-depth investigation, I think as part of like maybe recertifying his security clearance or just making sure that, nobody was noting anything kind of off about him.
Right.
I didn't know the guy, so I had trouble answering the questions, but I surely wasn't trying to, get him to lose his job or anything. Nancy Hagewood was one of Dr. Ivins' grad school colleagues who noticed his strange behavior. She later gave statements to both law enforcement and to the New York Times. Nancy and Bruce met in 1976 while at the University of North Carolina. At that time, he was working on his postdoctorate and she was a grad student. Now, she thought that he was odd, and she said she tried to avoid him, but he constantly made efforts to talk to her, and he was always asking about her sorority, Kappa Kappa Gamma. He specifically wanted to know about the sorority's secret rituals.
He wanted to know the inside handshake?
Or whatever went on. But what's the first rule of Fight Club?
You don't talk about Fight Club.
Exactly. I was never in a fraternity. I know you were in a sorority, so you can probably speak to it better. But my assumption is the first rule is don't give away whatever secrets that they have.
Exactly. Deny.
Deny, deny, deny.
Yep.
In the spring of 1979, Nancy was preparing to write her dissertation. She needed to transfer over data from her lab notebook. Now, she normally kept it locked in a room at the lab building, but her notebook went missing for a few days until she received a note telling her that the notebook could be found at a mailbox in Chapel Hill. The police went and got it, and they gave it back to her. Bruce Ivins later admitted that it was him. He had stolen it. He had written the letter. Later, at his workplace in Bethesda, Maryland, Ivins confessed his infatuation with Nancy to a doctor named Naomi Heller, who was a psychiatrist. He said that he thought Nancy's rejection of his friendship was essentially kind of a replay of his mother's mockery. And he confessed that he had thoughts about killing her.
Starting to get scary now, man.
It is. Obviously, all of this information comes out much later, and there's a reason why it's able to come out that we'll get to. But there's no doubt that Bruce Ivins had a secret obsession with sororities, and specifically Kappa Kappa Gamma. Agents later learned that in the 1980s, he broke into sorority houses in both Maryland and West Virginia. While he was at UNC, he snuck into the KKG house through a bathroom window, and he found a bunch of documents with some type of cipher that you needed to decode some of the sorority secrets. He stole that cipher.
Yeah. He solved them, didn't he? Some of the secrets.
Yeah, in 1980, he drove 3 hours to West Virginia University to break into the KKG house. He snuck in through a ground floor window, and he stole their ritual book. And basically what he did is he used a cipher from the University of North Carolina to decode sorority secrets. Seems so strange, this fascination, right? People get fascinated with all types of different things. But for this guy to be fascinated with sororities, and specifically this one sorority. Bizarre. And to want to know their secrets. I get it, but I don't. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, but what are you going to do with that, right? I mean, so you got their secrets, okay.
Yeah, I mean, what's the end game, I guess, is what, I'm kind of mulling over in my head. Nancy Hagewood noticed some strange things happening outside of her home in Maryland in 1982. Someone spray painted the letters KKG on her fence, on the sidewalk, and on her fiance's car window. Now, given their past history, she had a feeling it was Dr. Ivins, even though she'd never given him her address. But let's face it, Gibbs, if somebody wants to figure out where you live, even back in the 1980s, it could be done.
It's definitely easier today versus that big old Haynes crisscross book that we had to use back in the 80s. That thing was massive.
Yeah, I do not remember that. Of course, I was probably 7, so had little use for the Haynes crisscross book, whatever that was.
Yeah, it was magical.
But it sounds like you used it to great effect.
Absolutely.
In 1983, a letter that Nancy Hagewood had not written appeared in the Frederick News Post, signed with her name. The letter read, "As a member of Kappa Kappa Gamma, I am continually dismayed by attempts of the media and other outsiders to disparage the Greek system. I am especially incensed at vitriolic attacks on our practices of hazing, which non-Greeks fail to realize serve numerous valuable functions. No matter what the press may say about us, I'm still proud to be in a sorority. So Gibbs, she didn't write this letter, but it had her name on it, was sent to a newspaper. Ivins mailed a copy of the letter to a woman named Eileen Stevens, a New York woman whose son died in a hazing incident. He continued sending letters to Eileen expressing outrage at Nancy's statements, even though he was the one who wrote the letter. And he communicated with Eileen up until 1986.
So 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years or so. But, so why are we talking about this? I think it maybe gives some insight into what this guy was into, right? He obviously held some animosity towards this Nancy Hagwood. And how did he choose to display that animosity? Right? Maybe damaged some of her property, then made up this letter about her, and then started bad-mouthing her to a woman whose son died in a hazing accident. Is it foreshadowing? Possibly. And I guess Ivins and Nancy exchanged some email messages over the years. In some of them, he told her details about her children that she'd never shared with him. Okay, you're in Creepyville now.
Exactly.
Nancy told the New York Times he damaged my property, he impersonated me, and he stalked me. But Nancy was just one of several women who felt afraid and uncomfortable around Bruce Ivins. The LA Times reported that a psychiatrist who treated him in the late 90s confided to another therapist that Bruce Ivins was the scariest patient he'd ever had.
Well, that's speaking volumes.
On July 18th, 2000, Ivins told a counselor he planned to poison his former assistant. He said he had cyanide and he had the materials to make a bomb and saw himself as, quote, an avenging angel of death. So, yeah, you're beyond scary.
Exactly.
I think at this point, once you learn those details, kind of puts it into a little bit of context, right? Why a psychiatrist or a therapist might say, this is the scariest person I've ever treated.
And he's putting himself in this role, right? This avenging angel.
Because why? He feels like he's been slighted. Maybe he feels like he's been excluded like he was back in school.
Exactly.
Now, what's not known is whether or not the psychologist ever reported this incident. But Ivins was still obsessed with sororities in the 2000s. It's known that he made posts on GreekChat.com specifically about Kappa Kappa Gamma. He sent inquiries about details of sorority rituals. He even got into some type of editing battle over the KKG Wikipedia page. I mean, this is an organization, Gibbs, that he doesn't even belong to. Why are you worried about editing its Wikipedia page? And according to the New York Times, he created various online accounts to have these conversations. They also reported that he discussed attending AA in the past and called his mother an undiagnosed paranoid schizophrenic.
Oh, he is something.
He's a piece of work. But all of this is important because it's just a piece, right, of the bigger puzzle into why authorities ultimately believe Bruce Ivins was responsible for the anthrax letters. So Gibbs, Dr. Ivins had a P.O. box that apparently his wife didn't know about. He also liked to take long drives at night. He once admitted to driving to Ithaca, New York to leave gifts for a young woman who worked in his lab. Does it mean anything on its own? No, but when you're adding all these details together, I think that's what's important. He wrote emails about his mental illnesses and about feeling separated from his body. He described himself as a passenger on a ride. He also said that he was like a few feet away watching himself do things. In another email, he wrote, "When I get all steamed up, I don't pout. I push Bruce aside. Then I'm free to run about."
He's like trying to rhyme there.
Well, it did rhyme. It also kind of makes you think of like someone with a dissociative identity disorder.
Does. Yeah. And this might help explain a few things.
Maybe. That's the thing about this case. What's important, what's not. It's kind of why we're throwing everything in. It's known that Dr. Ivins did participate in group therapy. In an email that he sent on September 26, 2001, he wrote, "I'm really the only scary one in the group." Okay, so first of all, the timing of that email is important. And obviously what he's saying in that email is important as well. So after the events of 9/11, Dr. Ivins signed up as a Red Cross volunteer, according to the FBI archives. A few days before the anthrax attacks, he emailed a friend and said, "Bin Laden terrorists for sure have anthrax and sarin gas. Just decreed death to all Jews and all Americans." And I think some people point to this in correlation to what was in, one of the letters, which said death to America, death to Israel. Right? Very similar type of language.
Right, yeah.
On September 22nd, between two of the anthrax mailings, Ivins attended a Red Cross class on disaster services.
If Ivins did mail out those letters, is this his attempt to mask it and be look at me, I'm a good guy. I'm trying to do amazing things to help out what's going on in this country?
Yeah, I think you could look at it and make that conclusion. In the fall of 2002, samples of the powder were sent to Fort Detrick, and Ivins offered his help with the investigation.
So it's kind of like when murderers inject themselves into the case. It's, again, right? Is he injecting himself into this, or is he just a good guy?
Right. And I think that's kind of why we're heading down this road. But back on November 14th of 2001, Ivins committed one act in what a lot of people have called a series of suspicious behaviors. So he wrote an email titled "In the Lab," and he attached some photos of himself bending over petri dishes of anthrax. He wrote, "Hi all, we were taking some photos today of the now infamous AIM strain of Bacillus anthracis. Here are a few." And I guess Gibbs, he sent the message to his wife, to his children, some colleagues, former colleagues, high school classmates. But one of the recipients was an FBI agent working the Amerithrax case. Nancy Hagewood also was a recipient of this November 14th, 2001 email. She later told the New York Times, "I read that email and right away I thought he did it." Now, even though Nancy had her suspicions, she decided to, at that point, keep them to herself to avoid ridicule. On December 16th, 2001, at 8:45 a.m., Dr. Ivins sent an email offering to provide the AIM strain for genetic analysis or sequencing by whomever. He offered a sample of the original Ames anthrax found in 1981 from a Texas cow and a collection of spores sent to Fort Detrick in 1997 from the U.S. Army base in Dugway, Utah. In 2008, prosecutors announced that they were certain the attack powder was grown with germs from the Dugway flask Ivins offered. So this is important. It's going to come back later on and be a big part of, why they are so certain that Bruce Ivins was involved in all of this.
Yeah.
In early 2007, federal agents tried to narrow down their suspect. They learned that the rare AIM strain of anthrax was used in the attack, so they needed to find someone who had access to it. Their profilers believed that an American with an agenda committed these attacks. The physical letters had no fingerprints, hair, or human DNA, but the spores in the powder were dotted with these things called morphs, which are genetically distinct variants. Agents had to collect samples of Ames anthrax cultures around the world to find the morphs that matched the attack powder. And it was on January 23rd, 2002, that Bruce Ivins gave an FBI agent a tutorial on how to spot morphs in anthrax colonies. He showed the agents photos of morphs and explained how mutations made morphs grow differently. He suggested the FBI use morphs to catch the killer, a scientific technique that, according to everything I read, had never been used before in a criminal investigation. He also volunteered 2 names of people who he said had knowledge and character to have made and sent the letters.
Well, if he's the guy that did this, of course he's going to have a couple names to, right, throw the agents off.
Right. You want to point the investigation in another direction if, in fact, you are the person responsible. You know, my wife and I do a lot of shopping online, and we always use Rakuten. Rakuten is the smartest way to save money when you shop because you earn cash back at over 3,500 stores. We're talking fashion, beauty, electronics, home essentials, travel, dining, concert tickets, and more. Your favorite stores like Macy's, Nike, Sephora, Dyson, and Lowe's. And that's just to name a few. Pay Rakuten to send them shoppers. And Rakuten then passes on a part of that payment to its members as cashback. Cashback is deposited directly into your PayPal account, or Rakuten can send you a check. You can even maximize your savings by stacking cash back on top of other deals, like store sales and coupons. You're already shopping at your favorite stores. Why not save while you're doing it? It really is a no-brainer. Membership is free, and it's easy to sign up. Get the Rakuten app now and join the 17 million members who are already saving. Cashback rates change daily. See Rakuten.com for details. That's Rakuten. Your cash back really adds up. Hey folks, see if you've ever had this problem. You're trying to eat a little healthier, but you're in the grocery store aisle, you're looking at packaging, nutrition labels, and they're so confusing, you don't know what's good for you and what's not. Well, this is why I love Thrive Market, my go-to online grocery store for getting all of my healthy essentials delivered, and I don't even have to leave my couch. Finding better options for the whole family is easy with Thrive Market's Healthy Swap Scanner. Just scan a product, and it instantly recommends healthier swaps. This is how my wife and I found our new favorite snack, IQ bars. Sometimes I eat one in the morning with my coffee, sometimes just later on in between meals. They also have so many on-site filters that make it simple to shop by the needs of everyone in the family. Maybe you have someone who needs gluten-free food, somebody that has a peanut allergy. Well, no more scouring ingredient labels when you can just filter it all on Thrive Market. My wife and I often use the high protein filter to stock up on things like Sieti chips. Ready to make the switch? Go to thrivemarket.com/TCAT for 30% off your first order, plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/TCATT, thrivemarket.com/TCAT. In February 2002, the American Society for Microbiology sent an appeal from the FBI to its 40,000 members. Their message said it's very likely that one or more of you know this individual. And it was Nancy Hagewood who called the FBI to report her suspicions, and 2 agents came out to visit her. After her interview, they called every now and then, but it didn't seem as though they really believed anything she said about Ivins' history of disturbing behavior. At least they didn't believe it to the point where it made him look suspicious in these attacks. On February 27th of that year, Ivins took anthrax from his personal flask labeled RMR 1029, and he gave it to investigators who were creating the FBI Worldwide Library of Anthrax. Ivins put the spores in the wrong type of glass vessel, so his sample was rejected, and he was asked to submit a new one.
Bet he hated that, being so smart.
That he would have messed up? Maybe. In the spring of 2002, the Army discovered that in December 2001, Ivins had secretly swabbed for anthrax spores outside his secure lab space. He suspected that a technician's desk was contaminated, and he told an Army investigator that he found a bacillus. He scrubbed the desk, but he didn't write a report about the spill. But he did mention it to a Dr. Anderson, one of his friends and colleagues. The New York Times reported that in April 2002, Ivins wrote to the Army investigators. He said, "I had no desire to cry wolf. I would have been agitating a lot of people for no reason." He said he didn't want to disrupt the FBI inquiry and alarm his colleagues. Ivins told the investigators he conducted lab cleanups in April and December of 2001. In April, he conducted a search for stray anthrax spores after 2 researchers accidentally spilled a small amount of anthrax. Okay, that doesn't seem like a good thing, right, to have happen. And then in December, he bleached areas that he thought were contaminated. He said he was trying to help a junior technician who thought they had mishandled anthrax. Now, these actions were said to have been against lab procedures. Ivins also wrote that he couldn't recall if he retested the desk for anthrax after his cleanup, which was required by lab regulations. So the safety office was called to investigate. When they investigated the spill, 3 strains of anthrax were found outside the lab, including the AIM strain, which was used in the attacks. And some of the anthrax was actually found on the desk of Bruce Ivins.
Now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah, now we're really getting into the nitty-gritty. And I think, he's really coming to the attention of investigators. He's on their radar. As part of the investigation, the safety office looked into his employee records, and they noticed that Ivins worked unusually late hours, several nights before each of the anthrax mailings. He also lived across from Fort Detrick and often walked to work late at night.
I mean, that's not a problem, but it is suspicious when you know all this stuff is going on.
Well, yeah, I think that's what I was kind of thinking too. None of this is kind of the gotcha type of stuff.
Right.
But when you put it all together, you'd be hard pressed not to say that it doesn't look good.
Right.
It makes him look suspicious at the very least. In April 2002, Ivins turned over a new set of samples from his RMR 1029 flask of Ames anthrax. It tested negative for morphs, but investigators took their own samples from the flask and found 4 morphs, matching the attack powder. They tested the sample that he gave to a colleague and found a duplicate of his sample from February. Both tested positive for morphs. Rachel Lieber, the lead prosecutor, has said on the record that she believes he manipulated the sample he submitted to try to cover his tracks. But despite all of this, Ivins at this point was still not named a suspect because Gibbs, the police were focused on another man, Dr. Stephen J. Hatfield. Agents had been surveilling him for months. He was a physician. He was a virologist who worked at Fort Detrick from 1997 to 1999. They found out that he forged his PhD diploma, something I think that has happened to you on a number of occasions.
You got to do what you got to do.
I think some people do believe that. Now, he did earn a medical degree, but for some reason felt the need to forge a PhD.
I earned my medical degree as well. Just, it was all internet.
I think it was the University of the Caribbean, if I'm not mistaken.
UC.
UC.
Yeah.
UOC. UOTC.
It's a beautiful diploma in a frame that I have over my desk in my office.
Hey, as long as you're proud of it, man, that's really all that matters.
Best $4.99 I ever spent.
So apparently this guy had written a novel about a bioterrorism attack on Washington. He also wrote on his resume that he had working knowledge of biowarfare pathogens. So you could see why investigators would be interested in looking into this guy. Also, 1 month before the anthrax attacks, the government suspended his security clearance because I guess he barely passed the polygraph test.
I think it's either you pass flying colors or you don't pass.
No, he barely passed. I don't know what that means.
Well, you're going to know what that means when you do that.
The one on you?
On me, yeah.
So he was worried because he told his friends that he expected to be fired. And then 2 days before the anthrax mailings began, he filed a prescription for Cipro, an antibiotic that helps protect against anthrax. I think that's the antibiotic that I've actually taken. That sounds familiar.
It's a pretty popular antibiotic.
Yeah, it's not just for anthrax, but I guess it does help protect against anthrax.
It's for that one, virus you get sometimes.
Oh, you mean that one?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, we all know that one.
Yeah.
Is gonorrhea a virus? Sorry, I'm not trying to let anything out of the bag there.
For the record, I do not have that.
Allegedly. So on June 25th, 2002, the FBI searched Dr. Hatfield's home. Agents found what they called a harmless bacteria used as an anthrax stimulant and a notebook on anthrax dissemination. But agents were desperate to arrest this guy. They wanted it to be him. The problem is DNA tests, fiber tests, scent dogs, none of it found any real evidence against Dr. Hatfield. They even drained 2 ponds near his house to search for anthrax making equipment. They thought they found what they called, Gibbs, a homemade globe box, which I guess is something that people build to work with dangerous materials.
Yeah, but it was just a turtle trap.
Yeah, turned out to be a turtle trap. So ultimately, this guy filed a lawsuit against the FBI and eventually won a $5.8 million settlement.
It's a healthy settlement.
It is, but think about, what someone like this goes through. If they're ultimately cleared, they had nothing to do with it. But people think they mailed out, all of these anthrax letters. They killed people. They're a murderer. Okay, you better give me $5.8 million for that.
Yeah, because it's definitely career crushing, right? And reputational.
Everything.
And, yeah.
Yeah, you could lose your relationships. You could lose everything in your life. I go back to like what happened to Richard Jewell. I mean, literally everybody thought he was the Olympic Park bomber.
And they really did too.
Because every news outlet was reporting that he was.
People see that initial story, must be true, and then they just don't go and see the follow-up story.
Right. And how many people, see it on page 27 that, they found out he wasn't.
Yeah. Sorry.
In 2004, scientific testing confirmed that the mailed anthrax was grown near Fort Detrick. And I found this fascinating, Gibbs. Out of 60 domestic and foreign water samples, it was determined that only water from Frederick, Maryland, had the same chemical signature as water that was used to grow the anthrax.
Well, that is interesting.
It is. I mean, what you can do scientifically to narrow down where something came from based on the different components that was used to make it. That is, you got to admit, that is so fascinating. In early April 2004, Ivins was asked to help the FBI collect a complete set of cultures from Fort Detrick. The FBI found 22 vials of anthrax that hadn't been previously turned over. On April 6th, the lab assistant found a test tube of material that appeared to have been removed from Ivins' flask. The assistant gave the test tube to one of Ivins' colleagues, and this guy checked with Ivins, who told him to send a sample from that tube to the FBI. Ivins even sent an email to this guy, thanking him and acknowledging that the anthrax probably came from his personal flask. So on April 7th, investigators seized the stray flask, and the Bureau ordered a number of tests on the tube and on a sample taken from the tube. One was positive for morphs, one was negative. The Army's report confirmed the presence of Ames anthrax and 2 other anthrax strains in Ivins' office. Ames was found near a pass box where prosecutors later confirmed Ivins transferred one of the attack letters to the lab. So they're really tying him. They're really trying to tie him now. Anthrax was also found in the men's changing area. The problem they had was they really couldn't identify the original source of contamination and couldn't directly pin the attacks on Ivins. In late 2005, genetic analysis by top experts matched the spores to Dr. Ivins' flask. The problem is many of the investigators at this point were still extremely focused on Dr. Hatfield. And so they kind of ignored a lot of this evidence that was building up against Bruce Ivins. Then in early 2006, the The FBI contacted Nancy Hagewood for additional information. Agents asked her to begin correspondence with Dr. Ivins. I think by this point, Gibbs, many in the Bureau, including Director Robert Mueller, wanted to move away from focusing on Hatfield, so they brought in some new people. They shifted the focus to Bruce Ivins. And one of these individuals was an agent named Edward Montooth. In his opinion, Ivins was a much better suspect than Hatfield was because Ivins' entire career was dedicated to working with anthrax. And two of Dr. Ivins' friends told Montooth that Bruce had the skills to produce the deadly concentrations of anthrax that was found in the letters.
Well, like you said, this is his whole career.
He'd been doing it for, 20 plus years? And he had a lot of experience with it. Also, when friends and colleagues say, yeah, this guy had the technical ability to produce what was found in the letters. Okay. I think FBI agents are going to take that seriously.
I think so too.
I mean, I'm assuming these weren't friends outside of the professional community. They knew what all was involved.
Right.
They were kind of steeped in that type of work as well, is my thought. But Nancy did begin email correspondence with Bruce Ivins. According to the New York Times, he complained to her about the increased psychological screening. He said, I got so tired of the endless questions that I finally got a lawyer after almost 36 interviews.
It's a lot of interviews not to have a lawyer until after 36.
I'm sure he viewed many of those as very benign. This is what I do. They want to talk to me about it. They want information.
Yeah, I'm an expert in this field.
Yes. At some point, though, Gibbs, things must have shifted, right? His thought process must have shifted to maybe some of the questions they're asking are hitting a little close to home.
Yeah. Well, it definitely shifts in December of 2006.
It did, because that's when Agent Montooth informed Director Mueller that Ivins was the prime suspect. He talked about Ivins' obsession with KKG and how the Princeton mailbox where the letters were sent from was just a few yards from a KKG office. By this time, investigators had tested over 1,000 AIM samples from all over the world, and they only found 10, with 3 or more of the morphs that matched the powder used in the mailings. And all of those, they said, trace back to Bruce Ivins' flask. Now, there were 419 people reportedly at Fort Detrick who had access to RMR 1029. All of them had been cleared except for Bruce Ivins. Investigators recovered part of Ivins' original rejected sample from RMR 1029, and they found that it contained morphs matching the powder. They compared that to the 2002 sample, and I think to them, that was the proof that Ivins had manipulated the sample to hide the morphs, right? We talked about it. He put it in the wrong glass vessel. Really? This is a smart guy who's been doing this for a very long time. He's going to make that type of what you would have to call a rookie mistake. Or was it done purposefully because he knew what would happen if that sample was tested?
I definitely see him doing this on purpose. He's not an idiot. He knows what he's doing.
Well, I'm sure the feelings that you're having are the exact feelings that investigators had as well. And I think it was, in the months after all of this came out, agents really wanted to prosecute Bruce Ivins, but they still had a lot of holes. Number one, they had no evidence putting him in Princeton, New York. No receipt showing that he bought the envelopes used in the attack. No security camera footage of him photocopying the notes. None of his emails contained, even a hint of a confession. In May 2007, Dr. Ivins testified under oath twice to a grand jury. Now, he was assured by prosecutors that he wasn't a target of their investigation. He answered their questions. He only pleaded the fifth one time. And that was when he was asked about his interest in sororities. Hey, I'll answer all the questions.
Yeah.
But don't ask me about my secret sorority fetish.
Not going to do it.
Not going to answer that one. But I think no doubt Gibbs, at this point, they are all in on Bruce Ivins. The FBI searched his house on November 1st, 2007. They took computers, files, they took his guns. They found a shooting range in the basement. They questioned his wife and children. But what they didn't find was any anthrax matching the powder used in the mailings. At his home, Fort Detrick officials banned him from working with anthrax, which I can see that. If he's the target of this investigation, do you really want this guy having the ability to get his hands on more of this stuff? I think the problem for Ivins was that he felt like his life was, coming apart. Hey, they think I did this. I'm not allowed to do my work anymore. In early 2008, he interviewed with federal prosecutors. He admitted to making long drives at night. He admitted to being obsessed with sororities, blindfolding, and bondage. And he couldn't explain why he was working so late in the weeks leading up to the attack. Not long after this, in March of that year, Dr. Ivins drank fruit juice and vodka mixed with Valium. He lost consciousness and was found by his wife, Diane. She was convinced that he tried to take his own life despite his denials. He spent the spring of 2008 in residential alcoholism treatment. When he returned home, FBI agents were still following him. It's been reported that in July of that year, Ivins told his therapy group that he expected to be charged for 5 murders.
So that's big news to announce to your group.
Yeah. But he didn't stop there. He rambled about killing himself and also taking others with him. So it was after that he was removed from the lab completely. Forget about, hey, not having access to anthrax. We don't even want you in the lab, period. The FBI searched his house again. They found more guns. They found some bulletproof vests and ammo. Ivins voluntarily checked himself into a psychiatric hospital in Baltimore. He was there for 2 weeks until his wife brought him home on July 24th, 2008. And it was that same day that his group therapist went to a judge to get a restraining order against Ivins for making threats. So obviously, some of this stuff that was coming out in group therapy was not good.
No.
Not only was he talking about harming himself, he obviously was talking about harming others. Also on that day at 12:31 p.m., Dr. Ivins stopped at a grocery store. He bought some Tylenol PM, acetaminophen, and an antihistamine. He filled 3 different prescriptions. At 1:21 p.m., he purchased a second container of Tylenol PM. According to the New York Times, from July 24th to the 26th, Diane Ivins went back to her daily routine. She said she noticed Bruce was sleeping a lot, but he still got up. He went outside to check the mail. On a note, he wrote to his wife, "I have a terrible headache. I'm going to take some Tylenol and sleep in tomorrow. Please let me sleep, please." The next day, on July 27th, Diane found her husband, Bruce, on the bathroom floor. He was unconscious, but breathing rapidly. She called 911 and he was rushed to the hospital at 1:47 a.m. Ivins had taken a lethal dose of over-the-counter medication. He was in a coma, but woke up a few hours later. When a nurse asked him if he tried to take his own life, he nodded yes. Dr. Bruce Ivins eventually died from overdose complications on July 29, 2008. He was 62 years old. On August 6th of that year, the Justice Department called a news conference to discuss the evidence against Ivins. U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Taylor made the statement, "We believe that based on the evidence we had collected, we could prove his guilt to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt. Based on the totality of the evidence we had gathered against him, we're confident that Dr. Ivins was the only person responsible for these attacks." Their statement declared that unless new evidence surfaced, Dr. Ivins was the likely perpetrator. Dr. Hatfield was cleared of any wrongdoing. And obviously we know he later got a big settlement.
Big payday.
A clause in Dr. Ivins' will said that if he wasn't cremated and his ashes scattered, $50,000 from his estate would be donated to Planned Parenthood, an organization that his wife hated. So this led the FBI Gibbs to theorize that Ivins sent letters to the senators. He did because they were pro-choice, and Ivins was anti-abortion. On October 6th, his ashes were scattered at an unspecified location. I did find that very strange to write that in your will. I mean, obviously that's what he wanted to have done, but to say, hey, if you don't do this, 50 grand from my estate is going to Planned Parenthood, which I know you hate, right? Basically saying that to his wife. This is an incentive for you to carry out my wishes.
Yep.
The Anthrax investigation was formally concluded on February 19th, 2010, ending the largest investigation into a bioweapons attack in U.S. history. But Gibbs, not everyone was convinced that Bruce Ivins was the perpetrator. Some of his colleagues thought he was innocent. They tried to do their own review of some of the evidence. Apparently, Army officials ordered them to drop what they were doing. And then on February 15th, 2011, a group of independent scientists convened by the National Academy of Sciences released a review of the science used in the FBI investigation. The panel concluded that the evidence is consistent with the idea that Dr. Ivins was the perpetrator. But on its own, the science doesn't prove he did it. So I think you got to break this down. This is very interesting, right? Because you have this in a lot of cases. Everything, including some of the science, is pointing to the fact that he and he alone did this. But does it absolutely 100% prove it? No. They couldn't say that. Would it have been enough for a jury? Probably.
I think so.
I mean, it's a what if, because it never got that far. In July 2011, the federal government came under fire for contradicting its own assertions in a Florida lawsuit involving Robert Stevens' family. Robert Stevens was the first person to die in the anthrax letter mailings. His family accused the government of negligence, and some employees within the Department of Justice reported that they had problems with the investigation as part of their filings in the lawsuit. Then later in September, lawyers filed a sworn FBI declaration with 60 points reaffirming Ivins' guilt. So it sounds to me like they were circling the wagons, right? Some people were saying, we're not so sure. We got to circle the wagons, and everybody's got to get on board and say, here's all the things again that we think prove his guilt. An attorney for the Stevens family responded by saying that the government changed its filing because the evidence is conflicting. Several scientists who were questioned were sure of Ivins' innocence because they said he didn't have the technical skill to make the anthrax into powder. But the FBI argued that these witnesses didn't qualify as testimony experts because they were speculating. So there's some conflicting information there, right? So you have some people saying, no way did he have the technical know-how to make the powder. Others that knew him said, yeah, he could have easily done this.
Almost like an expert in it.
The lawsuit was finalized on November 28th, 2011, and a $2.5 million settlement was paid to the Stevens family. So Gibbs, as it stands today, and this is obviously a little strange for a True Crime All the Time episode, the Anthrax Murders case remains unsolved. I think to most people, from the totality of the evidence, it does seem like Bruce Ivins is the likely perpetrator.
Sure.
But at the same time, there are some problems with the investigation, some inconsistencies that I think you have to question. There's no doubt this guy was a little strange. He had a pattern of disturbing behaviors. The question is, was he really a killer? Now, I do believe that a lot of people look at the fact that he knew that the authorities were closing in on him. He took his own life as a sign of his guilt. Does it mean he was guilty? No, but I think a lot of people look at that and say, well, why would he do that?
Well, it leans more towards the way of guilt versus not guilt.
I think most people would say that exact same thing. The one thing that I point to is the fact that the FBI, the Army, they've never changed their stance on publicly stating that Dr. Bruce Ivins was the perpetrator. He was the one who mailed out these anthrax letters.
Yeah.
Does that mean they're 100% right? No, you can never say that. But obviously, they have a lot more information than we do.
Sure.
They have a lot of information that probably was never disclosed. And to be so confident in those statements, it means something.
I think it does.
I think it does too. And I think the majority of people think it was him. There's obviously people that do not believe that he did this, but
everybody has the right to a trial and due process and all that stuff. He didn't get his day in court.
Oh, he could have had it though.
Yeah, but he checked out early.
That's the thing. And I can only go by the facts as we know them. But, you also look at public opinion, and I would say most people believe that it was him.
I think we both agree.
But that's it for our episode on the Anthrax murders. We got some voicemails, Gibbs. You want to check those out?
Yeah, let's hear them.
Hey, this is Sarah. I am from suburbs of Chicago. I was just giving a call because I am leaving for my very first solo road trip. I guess not really road trip. It's about 4.5 hours. But you guys are going to be keeping me company, and you always keep me company at work. I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller. I think I've been listening for about 2 years, and love what you guys do. Team Mike, not either of you, but keep up the great work and stay safe and keep your own time ticking. Bye.
4.5 hours. That's a road trip.
Yeah. And your first one.
Yeah.
Right. That's like freedom, the open road. Do you remember the first time you ever got in a car for a 3, 4, 5 hour drive? I do. I remember going to visit my grandparents in Tennessee. I was driving from Ohio. I felt like DiCaprio on the Titanic, man. I was the king of the world.
And I remember that too. I was 14, stole that car, went for, very long time with that grand theft. Yeah.
It was the 50s, so the police had a hard time catching up to you.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Gibby. My name's Christina. I'm a fairly new listener. I actually started with your more recent episodes, and I worked my way down. But I decided to start from the beginning, and I just wanted to say, in your first episode, obviously you guys were still figuring things out, but I think I'm on the Donald Harvey episode right now, and I think it's only like the 6th or 7th episode that you guys have out. And I just wanted to say you guys grew into like your routine so quickly, and it sounds like you just released it, but I definitely love everything that you guys do and how you highlight the victim and, have respect for them, and you're very detailed with the information that you give us. But anyway, thank you, and keep your own time ticking.
Well, definitely appreciate the kind words. I remember back to the very beginning, Gibbs. It's almost been 5 years.
Yeah.
Now it will be 5 years in November. It wasn't easy. Starting out, you and I had zero background.
That's exactly right.
In anything to do with media and putting together a show or anything like that. So, it did take us a while to kind of figure out what type of show we wanted and what type of delivery and all of that.
Yeah, how we were going to record it.
Yeah. And I think, the first however many we recorded over Skype. We weren't even in the same room. So it obviously made things a little different.
Yeah.
We couldn't see each other's facial expressions and know kind of play off each other's body language and things like that.
It's definitely better once we came into the studio.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Hey, Mike Squared. It's Dave calling from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Just wanted to say I just recently started listening to you guys about a year ago. I've been hooked ever since. You guys are fantastic. Just got finished listening to the Bernardo episode, which you guys nailed. Yeah, that was nuts. Anyways, I'm just calling to say that there was another one that went down about a few years ago. His name is Dylan Millard. Yeah, he's it's like an onion. Once you start going through it, it peels back pretty crazy. Anyways, yeah, keep your own time ticking and have a good one, guys. Cheers.
Well, I can definitely say that Millard is on the list.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely on the list. But there's so many that we want to do. Obviously, we can only do one a week.
Yeah.
And we try to mix it up and go different places and change up the tone of the episodes.
Cadence.
Hey, how about that? Okay, I'll go with that.
Use big words every now and then too.
But not always effectively. But yeah, I mean, I love it when you throw the big words in there. But we appreciate it. We really do. No mailbag this week, Gibbs. So that's it.
All right.
For another episode of True Crime All the Time. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Inspired by the hit Wondery podcast Against the Odds comes the gripping guidebook, How to Survive Against the Odds, Tales and Tips for Animal Attacks and Natural Disasters. This might just be the most important book you'll ever read. Go inside life or death situations where everyday people survived nature's most extreme scenarios, and learn how you can too. In these tales, you'll hear about the grit, willpower, and know-how needed to endure shipwrecks, alligator attacks, earthquakes, and more. You'll learn from experts, including top doctors, about what happens to your body and mind in life-threatening situations. Plus, important tips on what to do, and equally important, what not to do when faced with a situation that is truly against the odds. Go to survivalguidebook.com to pre-order How to Survive Against the Odds today and get the perfect gift in time for graduation and Father's Day.